So this point 5, the evolutionists argue amongst one another. The fossil record has traditionally been considered the best evidence for evolution. They think it is. I don't. But the utter absence of true transitional forms continues to be an embarrassment. If we were to expect to find ancestors to or intermediates between higher taxa, it would be in the rocks of late Precambrian to Ordovician times, when the bulk of the world's higher animal taxa evolved. Yet transitional alliances are unknown or unconfirmed for any of the phyla or classes appearing then. Wow. How about the fact that it's inconsistent too? So we conclude that neither of the contending theories of evolutionary change at the species level, phyletic gradualism or punctuated equilibrium, seem applicable to the origin of new body plans. They say, we're totally a failure. But to keep on going. But we're not going to admit intelligent design. We're even going to say God particle. But it doesn't design anything. It just goes to nothing and comes back. Wow. Extinction versus speciation. Point 6. Evolutionists seem unable to realize the anomaly in the slow rate of speciation versus the high rate of a species extinction. Things are devolving, not evolving. Today's rate of extinction can be estimated through various analytical techniques to be a minimum of 1,000 and possible several thousand species per year. It normally takes tens of thousands of years for a new terrestrial vertebrate or a new plant species to emerge fully. How do they know that? And even species with rapid turnover rates, notably insects, usually require centuries, if not millennia, to generate a new species. Wow. They're talking through their hat. No wonder they buy so many hats. So far as ever observed, no new species are now being formed. It seems that evolution, if there is such a thing, is going in the wrong direction. You ever hear of Sir Isaac Newton? Things are devolving. There we go. Uniformitarianism. Another key defect in evolution. Although the history of the Earth and life has long been interpreted by the uniformitarian maxim, the present is the key to the past. More and more geologists are returning to catastrophism. Our science is too encumbered with uniformitarian concepts that project the modern Earth life system as the primary model for the interpretation of evolution and extinction patterns in ancient ecosystems. Detailed paleo-environmental data tell us that the past is the key to the present, not vice versa. One of the key evidences for great age is the uniformitarian interpretation of evaporites, but this very term is misleading. In referring to evaporite, the term begs the question, as it implies desiccation. For clarity in geology needs a new term, namely precipitate, rock created by precipitation. Hence, rocks of the evaporite facies could be precipitites deposited by precipitation from a supersaturated solution. Precipitation is, of course, a much more rapid process than evaporation, thus canceling out the necessity for long ages of evaporation in favor of rapid precipitation. Hey, welcome to creationism. Social harmfulness of evolution. And finally, number 8, social harmfulness, not social harmless, but social harmfulness of evolution. Evolutionists strongly complain when creationists point out the historically evil influence of evolutionism. Many evolutionists, however, do recognize this fact. We were victims of a cruel social ideology that assumes that competition among individuals, classes, nations, or races is the natural condition of life. Wars, pestilence, and that is also natural for the superior to dispossess the inferior. So I'm going to go around and kick my neighbor out of his house. For the last century and more, this ideology has been thought to be a natural law of science. Wow. The mechanism of evolution, which was formulated most powerfully by Charles Darwin. That's an evolutionist saying this since 1859. Robert Proctor shows how the major German societies of physical anthropologists collaborated with the SS program of race hygiene, helping to make racial policy. Want to kill a few Jews? Go ahead. Eugene Fischer, the most distinguished of German physical anthropologists, regarded by many as the founder of human genetics, was particularly helpful in these efforts. But surely American physical anthropologists spoke out clearly against the Nazi perversion of their science, and they did not. We have scientific bigotry. Creationists are not the only ones who find it difficult to get a hearing from the scientific establishment. Even evolutionists who do not conform to the majority viewpoint in evolutionary dogma at a given time encounter the same bigotry through the so-called peer review process. One of the most distinguished modern astronomers is Nobel Prize winner Hans Alfvén, who espouses an alternative cosmology to the Big Bang. Here is his testimony. Even Nobel laureates must defer to the scientific establishment. Here it is. It has given me a serious disadvantage. When I describe the phenomena according to this formalism, most referees do not understand what I say and turn down my papers. But the argument, all knowledgeable people agree that, with the tacit addition that by not agreeing you demonstrate that you are a crank, is not a valid argument in science. If scientific issues always were decided by Gallup polls and not by scientific arguments, science will very soon be petrified forever. For reasons of space, these quotes have been somewhat abbreviated, but they do represent quite fairly, if incompletely, the opinions of the respective authors. It is obvious that evolutionists argue vigorously among themselves, even though they present a solid front when arguing against creationists. Just possible, the combination of outside attacks by creationists with the infighting among evolutionists will eventually cause the collapse of the straw house of evolution itself. Now, it won't, not until the second coming, because there's a hatred of God. Many of the evolutionists are God haters. After all, no one has ever seen real evolution in action, and no one knows how it works. So its foundation is very weak. Actually, it isn't. Its foundation is very strong, because beyond the foundation of science, or what they think is science, is their hatred of God. They're all unified in that. One day it will be said, the winds blew and bare upon that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. Matthew 7:27. So we have a summary here. The bankruptcy of uniformitarianism. As I said from this article, as I quoted, that they're widely turning toward catastrophism because they just can't explain strictly uniformitarianism. Everything's the same as we see it today. It hasn't in the past been any different. The present widely accepted system of uniformitarianism in historical geology, its evolutionary basis and bias, has been shown to be utterly inadequate to explain most of the important geologic phenomena. Present rates and processes simply cannot account for the great bulk of the geologic data. Some form of catastrophism is clearly indicated by the vast evidences of volcanism, diastrophism, glaciation, coal and oil and mineral deposits, fossilization, vast beds of sediments, and most of the other dominant features of the Earth's crust. Catastrophic form quickly. When this fact is once recognized, it can be seen that even the supposed evidences of great geologic age can be reinterpreted to correlate well with the much more compelling evidences of violent and rapid activity in formation. You see a mini Grand Canyon form in Northern California in 9 hours. Hello? But if present processes cannot be used to deduce the Earth's past history, and this fact is proved not only by the failure of geological uniformity, but even more by the impregnable laws of conservation and deterioration of energy, then the only way man can have certain knowledge of the nature of events on the Earth prior to the time of the beginning of human historical records is by means of divine revelation, the Bible. And this is why the Bible record of creation and the flood immediately becomes tremendously pertinent to our understanding, not only of the early history of the Earth, but also the purpose and destiny of the universe and of man. We have therefore sought to show how the outline of Earth history provided by the early chapters of Genesis, as well as by the related passages from the other parts of the Bible, actually provides a scientifically accurate framework within which all of the verified data of geology and geophysics fit together remarkably well. The great deluge of Noah's day is seen to account for a large portion of the sedimentary rocks of the Earth's crust. Hence, it's not perfectly consistent around the world. It depends upon which wave hit which wave, and indirectly for the glacial and other surface deposits which resulted from the change in the Earth's climate at the time of the flood. You got a lot of water out there, and you're going to have a quick climate change. We have therefore sought to show how the outline of Earth history provided by the early chapters of Genesis, as well as by the related passages from other parts of the Bible, actually provides a scientifically accurate framework within which all of the verified data of geology, geophysics fit together remarkably well. The great deluge of Noah's day is seen to account for a large portion of the sedimentary rocks of the Earth's crust, and indirectly for the glacial and other surface deposits which resulted from the change in Earth climates at the time of the flood. Lubenow, in his book, according to the basic principles of the philosophy of science, a theory must be falsifiable if it is a legitimate scientific theory. How could the theory of evolution be falsified? Supposedly, if fossils are found that are woefully out of order from what evolution would predict, and they have been, many such fossils have been found. KP 271 is just one of them. However, evolutionists ignore the morphology of fossils that do not fall into the proper evolutionary time period. They wave their magic wand to change the taxon of these fossils. Thus, it is impossible to falsify the concept of human evolution. It is like trying to nail jelly to the wall. That evolutionists resort to this manipulation of the evidence is a confession on their part that the fossil evidence does not conform to evolutionary theory. It also reveals that the concept of human evolution is a philosophy, not a science. To the evolutionist, there is but one primary fact in the universe, evolution. Everything else is just data. The value of this data does not depend upon its intrinsic quality, but upon whether or not it supports evolution and its timescale. Good data is that which supports evolution. Bad data is that which does not fit evolution, and it is to be discarded. It is time to ask the paleontological community, at what point does philosophical bias in the interpretation of the human fossil material become intellectual dishonesty? At the beginning. The interpretation of KP 271 from Kenapoi justifies that question. Evolution implies a naturalistic, mechanistic origin of things. That the human fossil ever found, that the oldest human fossil ever found, skimpy as it is, reveals that man was virtually the same 4.5 million years ago on the evolutionist timescale as he is today, suggests that humans appeared on the scene suddenly and without an evolutionary ancestors. Prior to 4.5 million years ago, the hominid fossil record is a virtual blank for 10 million years. This supports the idea that humans were created by a supreme being. We are continually told how bad it is to mix religious implications with science. We don't mix them. These implications are already there. Evolutionists act as if creationists have been trafficking in something very dark and sinister. How many young minds have we led astray by telling them that there is a creator? Just for the fun of it, Let's grant the evolutionist his point. Let's assume that there is something